Meeting the needs of those experiencing or on the verge of homelessness is a problem that seems to grow by the day. The nonprofit Changing Homelessness is on the front lines of that challenge and tonight celebrates 50 years in Jacksonville. Here to talk about the event and the work is Jacksonville native, former Green Bay Packers safety, and Hall of Famer LeRoy Butler. Welcome.
Thank you, Ann, for having me.
It's a
For
delight.
us, not just me.
Thanks for all of you for being here. We're also joined by
Very
Dawn
exciting.
Gilman, the CEO of Changing Homelessness.
Happy to be here.
And you want Alan here to along for the ride.
Along for the ride today. Yeah, because you're here. That's the reason I'm here.
That's more than enough. Thank you for being here, Yuana. It's
Just
great to
don't
see
make
you.
her laugh,
Welcome.
please.
Thank you.
Because it's a good laugh, we should say.
Yes.
A beloved laugh.
I appreciate that.
Leroy, for those who don't
Yeah.
know, your football career actually started here in Jacksonville.
Mhm.
Remind us how you came up. You played at Lehigh, which
Yes.
is now Riverside.
Riverside, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, if you understand how tough it was for poverty growing up in the Blodgett homes, if you're from Jacksonville, Florida, you're going to be familiar with some of these names, but stayed across the street from Jefferson Street Pool. My mom raised 5 kids by herself, and I was a disabled kid and special needs. But for some reason, God said, "You want to play in the NFL?" I said, "Well, who am I going to tell that to?" And I told it to the family, and I was going to Hope Haven Children's Hospital, and they said, "Well, his feet are kind of pigeon-toed. He may have to wear some braces, and we have to put him in casts and stuff like that." But so growing up, to me, my heroes were people that my grandmother always talked about, were my teachers, because kids picked on me for wearing hand-me-downs. I never got invited to sleepovers, never went to the mall and stuff like that. And I remember my grandmother saying, um, God gave everybody a talent. And I didn't know what she was talking about, because if you're a kid and you get picked on a lot, you don't think you have any talent. And then she said, "No, you have a great talent because nothing negative bothers you." And that's when she told me the real heroes help people who they don't know. And as a young kid, you hear that, that shaped my whole thinking. And that's why working with changes homelessness means something to me. Because when you're growing up in extreme poverty, and sometimes you can be middle of the road, 1 or 2 paychecks from being out, to one day it may be somebody in a room discussing policy to put somebody in prison because they can't afford to live in a nice place. That kind of anxiety is the reason why we do events like tonight. But me as a person, Fort Caroline Junior High, I almost went to Terry Parker.
Mhm.
I wouldn't have time for that story. Went to Lehigh and got with Coach Corky Rogers, and that's when I started feeling that God-given ability to play football.
When you first were coming up, you alluded to the fact that you had
Yeah.
some kind of defects with your legs.
Yeah.
You were severely pigeon-toed. You actually had to have your
Yeah.
legs broken or your feet
Yeah.
broken.
Yeah, the little white corrective shoes, they didn't work for me. They worked for every kid, but not me. So they was like, "Well, Miss Butler, he has to go through PT." I didn't know what that was, physical therapy. And she was like, "Well, if you guys go out to like Disney, which was unheard of, he has to be in a wheelchair because you can't move, or he has to wear these crutches." But my sister was my hero, of course. She just wanted to take the braces off so you can be normal when you're in the home. And I couldn't go to the swimming pool mainly because I couldn't swim, but mainly because I had to wear braces to walk. If you see a penguin or a pelican or any bird just walks, and it's just kind of, that's how it was. So it goes all the way up to the hip. So they got to correct that. And pretty much for the most part, it did, but my left foot still was a little pigeon-toed. But so I was never the fastest kid. That's what I tell all kids. It's not really the height and weight. It's just if you can understand what the coaches are telling you, and you can play.
So in your early years, you were actually watching kids in the neighborhood play
Yes.
football from a wheelchair.
Yes, yes, and from the porch, because mainly I like seeing other kids happy. That was my joy. To other people would say, no, if I can't do it, I don't want anybody else to do it. But I would, everybody was out of the house because you go play as a kid, you go play. But I had to stay in because I couldn't do those things. So my favorite uncle, Charles, we call him Uncle Vaughn, he would come by and he would sit there on the porch and he said, you know what? I got some VHS tapes and let's go watch some NFL. I said, really? It's baseball season. So we would go to his house and put in, I know some millennial here, they got VHS tapes.
What's
Yeah, we
that?
have VCRs. But I would watch the NFL and every day, every day. And they had sign up for the YMCA football. And it was $38. I didn't have it. And my uncle said, if you really want to play, I'll get it for you. And my heart was beating so, because they test you like how fast can you jump and the anxiety of not being athletic. I didn't let that bother me because I was so happy to be on the field. When you see other kids playing, I never looked up and said, God, okay, why you pick me to be here? Like, can't run and jump. I'll be on the bus and kids would pick on you because my teacher used to come get me. That didn't bother me. What bothered me that I didn't have the opportunity, and my uncle helped me get the opportunity.
You went on to play for the Green Bay Packers.
Yes.
Some may or may not know that you actually originated the Lambeau Leap, which is
They better know it if they got the internet. Yeah, that to me was 30 years ago last December, and I'll never forget it. And that was my first time being in a cold game because I'm from Duval County, and when I played in that game, it was 20 below. I really thought they were going to forfeit the game. I went over to the thermostat because I'm a diva. Sorry. I used to always check the weather. And it said a minus next to a 20. I'm like, my refrigerator is 32 degrees. We're going to die. It was like, no, we'll give you stuff to keep you warm. And when I got the fumble, and Reggie White, I called the fumble. Reggie White picks it up. He laterals it to me, and I'm running down the sideline. I got about the 15-yard line. Just spontaneously, I said, I'm going to jump in the stands. And I think it's one of the best celebrations because it's not just me, it's the fan base. We are the best fan base because they're owners. We don't have an owner. The Jaguars has an amazing owner that does a lot. But we didn't have an owner, so you can
the
jump
Packers
up there.
owns the team, the Green Bay
Yes.
Packers.
You can buy stock. It's amazing. And so to celebrate with them, I thought was just tremendous. So it's something that we do quite a bit.
It's a great tradition.
Yes.
Dawn, how did Changing Homelessness connect with LeRoy Butler, and what does it mean to have him as, an advocate and a spokesperson?
Well, he is an amazing spokesperson and has just his excitement, not just with football, but in celebrating Jacksonville and Northeast Florida and trying to make it a better place for everyone. He has been an amazing spokesperson for us as we celebrate our 50 years in the community. So the connection is actually through his former wife, who was the drill coach of Yuana Allen, who works with us. And
Yeah.
it just came about kind of organically, and that he was going to be in town last year when we do an annual volunteer appreciation and state of homeless breakfast. And he was going to be around and graciously agreed to help us out with that. And then at the breakfast, apparently he had such a good time, he announced he was going to be our ambassador for our 50th year. I have heard all this secondhand because that's when I got COVID. So
She wasn't even there.
I was not at any of the events.
But she looked amazing on Zoom, though.
So it's, we were founded 50 years ago, very, very grassroots. It was other agencies. It was the downtown churches. It was the people that were working directly with people on the streets throughout the community. And for many years we weren't even incorporated. We did not become incorporated until 2001, and that was
Oh
so we
wow.
could handle federal grants, right? For the money to be able to come into our community, someone has to be responsible for it, and you have to be recognized by the feds for that. Um, there was actually not an employee of the agency until 2004.
Was that you? Were you the
No,
first?
I'm actually the third ED CEO of the agency. So I like to think I've been here the longest. I think I've made the most changes. When I started, there was just me. We now have 85 people. We concentrate in Duval, Clay, and Nassau counties. We are the lead agency for the state. The counties and the feds recognize us there, so we do a lot of real direct work there. We also have a very large grant for veterans that's 17 counties, that is from Daytona Beach up to Savannah, Georgia. So we run the coastal counties that way. So we have changed a lot in 50 years and a lot in the past 15 years. We do most of our direct service is either for veterans or in outreach and coordinated intake here in Northeast Florida.
And we needed someone to help us leap into 50 years, thus
Oh, I like
Mr.
that.
Butler helping us leap
Yeah.
into 50 years. So that's how that whole concept came about in terms of the anniversary itself.
And you're the facilitator of that. You brought all that together.
I am. I did. Yes.
You've
You
got
bragging
your,
over there, ain't you?
She asked me a question.
Yeah,
I
right.
answered the question.
No, she don't even like talking about herself, but she was. My grandmother always said God made everybody good at something, and Ioana's just the most organized person I've ever met, and the vision of what she wanted is truly amazing. Because if you know my story, and of course Miss G, but she doesn't get a lot of credit, but you're amazing. I'm not trying to make you cry, but
you're
Oh,
gonna
I
make
love
her.
her.
I'm about to
I do. I
cry.
love her. I love her because she's just very organized.
And
So that's
she
really helped.
and when 50th anniversary, I always
Yeah.
like, we're a homeless organization, right? Part of the homeless coalition.
Yes.
We should not have some big gala. It's got to be something that can really connect. And she came up with the idea of a sneaker ball.
Platinum.
So it
Pretty
is the
high.
Homes for All sneaker ball is
Yeah.
is happening tonight, and so you can literally, if you wish to show up in your tennies and a tracksuit, come on down.
Wow.
If you want to wear a big fluffy gown in your tennis shoes, that's okay too. So that's
Classic black tie or tracksuit fly.
Or,
So
or tracksuit
come,
fly.
come as you are. We just want you to come.
That's awesome.
If you're just joining us, we are talking with NFL legend LeRoy Butler about tonight's 50th anniversary celebration of Changing Homelessness. You can join our conversation on air by calling 904-549-2937. You can also email First Coast Connect at wjct.org or reach out on social media. The work of addressing homelessness has also changed.
Yes.
And I wonder, LeRoy, if when you come back to Jacksonville, it looks different in terms of the problem, if it's becoming more visible.
Yeah, it is. Because when I originally came back and the Blodgett homes were torn down and they kind of reconstructed it. And we're doing a documentary on my life story. And some
And
of the,
Blodgett's,
yeah,
for people who
yeah,
don't know, I mean, that was
yes,
a troubled, it was a public housing project
yes, ma'am.
that had
Yeah.
some, I mean, had some crime problems. It had
To
some
say the least.
maintenance problems.
Everything. I mean, it was. We used to have this saying that Cabrini Green in Chicago and the Blodgett homes are two of the housing projects, crime and just out of control that people would avoid. And they said, "Wait a minute, you made it out of the Blodgett homes?" And I'm like, "Yes." Even like my older kids, I would take them by. I said, "Oh, that's not where it was." We had the original pictures in my book, and
Because the new
yeah.
Blodgett homes looks very different.
Oh yeah, that's the suburbs compared to this, because it was just a place that, like my mom said, somebody's gonna come out of here and do something great. And then she gave me this amazing quote. She said, "To be a leader, you must once had to be a good follower. But if you're going to follow, choose the right leaders." And I said, Mom, that's deep. I'm only like 9. You drill that down. Teachers, police officers, first responders, um, people like that. People who help people who they don't know. Because it could be families right now at Changing Homelessness that we don't know, but we're going to help them. That's why we have to have events like this. And that's how I grew up. And I'm so proud of that because I do know some athletes who grew up in the inner city, they don't like discussing it because they don't want people to know it. I always tell people about Duval and how I was raised. I mean, grew up in the Blodgett homes because I represent those people.
The problem of homelessness, Dawn.
Mhm.
You're celebrating 50 years, but
Yeah.
it is a time where we're seeing an increase really in, across the country in the problem of homelessness, the lack of availability of affordable housing.
Mhm.
And it's certainly something that I think people can sense just driving around the city.
Yeah, it is much. It's much more visible, and it has grown. How I like when I do any kind of public speaking, I like to start with the statement that homelessness, as we know it today in America, is a solvable problem.
Agreed.
Yep, and while we do see more people who are forced to live on the streets in Northeast Florida now than we have in quite some time, it's still a relatively small number. It's a small enough number that it is solvable. But like you said, it takes not just it takes building what we call attainable or deeply affordable housing. That's usually housing with a subsidy, and the people to help people get back in and sustain that housing. Usually something has happened that's forced someone out of their home. It could be, very often it's a health incident,
Mm-hmm.
a loss of a partner or spouse. There's been some sort of shock to the system, and sometimes people need a little bit extra support. So when we raise money outside of what our governmental grants give us, it's to add in all those other things that maybe are not covered by a grant to make sure that we can provide all of the wraparound services that are needed.
What kind of services are there? I mean, what else is needed besides just the housing for this?
So,
Well, that's a good question. That's a good question.
so we need there's a couple different things. If you look at how if we were to, and we have, as not me but a group of us that work in this have written for the current administration, what's the 5-year plan to end homelessness? What would it take? You need folks that go out and engage with people who are literally homeless, that are able to meet them where they are, to rebuild that trust and that connection so they will be willing to come back in. We need a place for them to go immediately, right? If someone's willing to come in today, where can they go today? Right now, it's often very hard. If someone's ready to go, we may not have a shelter bed that's accessible to them on that day. And we also need a pathway either directly off the street or from that transitional temporary housing into something that's permanent for them. It may be something in our sector, we call it rapid rehousing. That's a short-term housing subsidy, and we're building up the household income. They hold the lease, and eventually that temporary assistance goes away because the family's going to maintain their own housing. There's about, say, 10 to 20% of folks who are on the street that need something more that we call permanent supportive housing. These are folks that have some sort of diagnosed disability. They've been on the streets for a year or more. They need more intensive wraparound services, and they need to get those services probably within their own home where they feel safe and secure. So it's when we look at the different components of it, it, as I like to say, we're not doing a manned mission to Mars, right? We need the database to know who's where and what and how are we connecting them and how are we braiding the funding. We need outreach to go out and talk to people. We need coordinated entry to refer people to where they need to go. And then we need things like emergency shelter, transitional housing, rapid rehousing, and permanent supportive housing. Different things for different people. Um, it's it, it's it's very rarely we call it a one and done, right?
Mhm.
Where you just give someone a little bit of money and then they're good. They can go back. There are a few people like that. We try to catch them early to bounce them up and out, but usually it takes a little bit more to get someone fully out of homelessness where they can sustain and maintain housing for themselves.
And we did a program recently I actually want to take a couple calls. I'm going to interrupt
Sure.
myself. I don't want to leave these people hanging. We got a call from Eric in Arlington. Good morning, Eric. Go ahead.
Yeah, real quick. First of all, I really enjoyed your guest's football career. It was always a point of pride for me to be watching a football game, and LeRoy Butler would do something great on the field, and I could turn to people and say, yeah, he's from Jacksonville. As a person who's lived in Jacksonville since he was 5 years old, it's a point of pride for me when people do good from here. Two questions, and you don't have to answer them if you don't want to. In 2020, there was the George Floyd controversy in which a lot of professional NFL players, NBA players, and so on, chose to make a stand, or actually the opposite, they kneeled during the national anthem, and basically chose to be involved in this political event, I guess you'd say. So my first question for you is do you think that's the right place? I personally do, but do you think that's the right place for athletes? Do you think athletes should be involved politically? And my second question is for your other guests, and that is it frustrating for you when you're out there working and you have a governor in the state of Florida who's actively working against you? For instance, I could think of many examples, but the most glaring one is the $3.5 billion Medicaid expansion, which DeSantis has refused. And that's money for poor people to get their teeth fixed, to get health care when they got cancer, and so on and so forth. So is it frustrating for you as an organization to have, people working against you?
Thanks, Eric. Thanks. Let's start with you, LeRoy.
Yeah, I think, first of all, thanks for the compliment and the support. I think that's truly amazing. Anytime you protest anything, it's going to be uncomfortable for somebody. But when you're free, you're free. And I think that's the good thing about it is we can't have it both ways. I know this is leap year when everybody wants to vote, make things politics. But I think for the most part, I don't mind a guy, just like the young man from Kansas City who said that's his view. I don't have a problem with that because everybody just has to have opinion on what they live by, what's their religion. We can all live here. We don't have to always agree, but respectfully, see, the politicians are supposed to go after each other. But as Americans, we can agree to disagree, just like the barbershop. People disagree, but if we both get our hair cut, and it's fine. I have people on both sides of the aisle. I have people who knelt, people who didn't, but the game still goes on. But ultimately, it's to bring attention to something that we all can work on so we all can live in a most beautiful place like America.
And Dawn, about the governor, the question.
I'm going to have a remarkably similar response to Mr. Butler over there. Governors in Florida get to serve for 8 years. We've been around for 50. It is my job to work with whomever is in office on the local, state, and federal level. It is also my job to educate not only our elected officials, but also our citizens on what are different things that can work to help solve the problem. The caller, Eric, brought up Medicaid, Medicare expansion. That did amazing things during COVID when more people were able to access that funding, that medical help. And it's important for citizens and electeds to know one of the leading causes for people to fall into homelessness is medical debt. That is a real thing. So anytime we have an opportunity to expand access and funding for that, we have to look at it closely. With all things, there is a cost to it. But as I also remind a lot of electeds, there's a cost to doing nothing. So we have to weigh both of that. I will say that for the most part, homelessness and ending homelessness has remained a bipartisan issue. Across the aisle, conservative or more liberal, I have run into no one that believes a fellow human being should be forced to sleep on the streets, right? So as LeRoy said, we can have a difference of opinion on how to get there, but I can work with your why.
Exactly.
If your why is to end homelessness, let's figure out where our overlap is and work with that.
Got a message, Tiffany, from Facebook. She says, amazing story on how a family can be instrumental in placing a child on another path. Family is so important. We have a call. Curtis on the north side. Good morning, Curtis. Go ahead. We just have a couple minutes left.
Okay, thank you, Ann. Good morning, Ann. You do a beautiful job, my sister. Mr. Butler, brother, that is an inspirational story. A story of perseverance, brother. Everyone should be able to hear that. It doesn't matter what their tax bracket is. That is so inspiring, man. That is beautiful, brother. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you so much. It also means a lot that the impact of helping people like tonight. Now, and I'm going to win the shoe cam best shoes.
You're
tonight.
sure of that?
Yes, but this Miss G and Joanna have disqualified me.
As you should be.
Okay.
As you should be.
So I'll just be a judge.
Okay.
And I'll be fair.
What are you going to be? What are you being displaying tonight on the?
I don't want to give
footwear?
away what I want.
Just give us a sneak peek.
Well, I have 3 types that I'm going to wear. Thank you for asking. I have a brand new LeBron James shoe that nobody has seen. Okay, nobody. I also have a Sketcher that Snoop Dogg sent me personally, and I have some old school Jordans that I'm going to wear. So I don't want to give it away.
Are you changing shoes like several times throughout
Hey,
the
don't be
night?
trying to
Oh,
peek
okay.
behind the
He already
curtain.
said he was a diva, so I'm going to go with
Yeah, there
I
you go.
expect all 3. Absolutely. All 3 shoes tonight.
There are not many tickets left. Is that right? You want
There's
to?
not many tickets left. If
Yeah.
you are interested in coming to the ball, you need to go to our website. It's changinghomelessness.org and purchase your tickets. If you cannot make it, still go to the site and give. We would
Just do it,
appreciate that. This effort, this ball is really about making investment in our community, and we appreciate all gifts. No gift is too small.
Well, you want to, Alan, LeRoy Butler,
Thank
Dawn
you, Ann,
Gilman.
so
thank you
much.
so much for being
Thank
here
For
you.
today.
having us. Always good to see you.
Great show.